Welcome to the Veteran Show. My name is Levi Miller. I'm one of the hosts.
And I'm Tom Luke, and I'm the other host. I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. I'd like to welcome our guest this week is Bob Kern. He is the author of the We Were Soldiers 2 book series. It's a Cold War book series that's ongoing. Bob has completed 3 books so far and is only working on books 4 and 5. I'll let Bob explain more in depth on the books. I have read the series so far, but we'll let Bob explain what he's done in books 1, 2, and 3 and what's going on with the additional books. So, Bob, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Thomas.
Levi, you want to start off with questions, or where you want to start at?
Now I'm gonna let Bob take it from there, cause I love the book that you wrote, Bob.
Well, Bob, I tell you what, Bob, why don't you go ahead explain, give an explanation to the listeners what books 1, 2, and 3 are about, please.
All right. Well, book 1 is my autobiography. It's really what got me started down this path. As we've talked, a lot of the Cold War vets felt kind of awkward or guilty after 9/11. I know I did anyway. When people would come up and thank me for my service, and I would actually tell them, "I'm sorry, I didn't fight during this war. I'm a Reagan soldier." And after about a year, I thought, you know what? There's nothing to be ashamed about. What we did during the Cold War was very important. It was very hard. And I'm going to write a book about my service because I know I was very proud of my career. I had a very distinguished career over the 8 years that Reagan was in office. And so I told my story from the time I joined at 17 years old in basic training through Germany and my duty stations, and how it converted this naive little 17-year-old kid into a hardcore Army first guy by the time I got out. And because of the responses I was giving people about being a Reagan soldier, I thought that would be a cool name. So I called it We Were Soldiers 2, serving as a Reagan soldier during the Cold War. And I had really planned on that being it. I've always wanted to write. I had a dozen other books in my head I wanted to tackle, but I had such a very, very strong response from the Cold War community, veteran community, thanking me for taking the time to write these books, and really, really grateful that somebody was actually writing what it was like to serve during the Cold War. And the emails and messages I got were just, they brought tears to my eyes. My wife and I really got choked up over some of them because they were just so grateful to have someone tell their story. Many of them said they felt the same way I did right after 9/11 about not having seen combat when everybody was thanking them. So I thought, well, let's do a sequel to this, and I will do stories on other people's career and kind of break it down over a historical timeline and use different branches of service and different jobs. And I put a feeler out there, and again, I was overwhelmed with the responses and ended up deciding to do 2 sequels because I had a bunch of people that had served in Germany, and I had a whole bunch of people that were served in Korea along the DMZ and just in South Korea. So book 2 came out about the guys that served in Germany, and there's 17 soldiers I used in that one female. It's basically about what it was like serving an hour and a half from the mass horde that the Soviet Union had built up there on the east border along the Iron Curtain, and what life was like over there. And then book 3 is, of course, serving along the DMZ and the responsibilities of the guys in the support roles and the guys that are on patrol. And it covers from 1962 to 1991. It has 7 veterans with 9 tours there. And book 2 actually covers from 1960 through 1989 in Germany when the wall came down. And so so far I've painted a pretty cool picture of serving in those hot spots. Right now, as Tom mentioned, I'm working on books 4 and 5, and actually 6 is on the table now too. 4 is Cold War at Sea. 5 is they call themselves the Romeos, but it's going to be the radar crews, so where they served in the hot spots during the Cold War. And then help me out, Tom, what's book 7?
Okay.
It's the cavalry guys that served along what it was like to actually defend along the Iron Curtain in East Germany and the Fulda Gap and the border patrol duties. So it's going to have a lot of the cavalry guys in it. So anyway, that's where we're at now. There's plans for 12, maybe even 15 books in the series.
Wow, you're doing a lot of writing, Bob.
Yeah. Well, I got sidetracked. I got 2 books out in January and July of last year, and I got hit with some personal and some health issues at home that no one can blame me. I had to shift my priorities and take care of business at home.
Oh yeah.
Now that we've got everything in line, I'm refocused, rededicated. The interviews are going, the research is done, and I actually expect to spit out the next 4 books this year. The 4th book, I don't know, I'll tell you about it too. I came across a story that about 1983 being the closest that the United States and the Soviet Union ever came to actually going to war. And those of us that served in Germany, we knew that it was pretty tough because of what we went through during that period in Germany. But none of us knew how close it was. And in fact, next to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviets were prepared to a preemptive strike of nuclear weapons against us because they were so convinced that Reagan was building things up and preparing to strike against them. So that's going to be, I'm doing a series of things on my blog to build up to that, and then each blog I use will be a different chapter that I'll write for that book. So 1983, the year the Cold War almost went nuclear.
Yeah, that's the one a lot of people don't realize that how close it came then. Or at least older people, us, like our age. The younger generation, many more, I guess what they call the millenniums, many of them were born after the wall came down, which has been hard to believe, 28 years already.
Yeah. Well, I think that this started out as a series just to get our stories out there, to make sure that history doesn't completely forget us. And it's turned into so much more than that because this generation doesn't have a clue. The Cold War is rearing its ugly head again.
Oh yes.
Rearing its ugly head. And people don't have any idea that this is exactly what it was like back when we served. And as for the 1983, I was in Germany in 1983. I didn't have a clue that there were events leading up that, the war was coming. Just like I didn't have a clue, I never served in Korea. I did not know that you guys were down there with live rounds.
Oh yes.
I didn't know that there was firefights going on. None of that stuff. And I was a soldier serving at the time that all that was going on. So that kind of shows you how hush-hush the government kept all the activities of the Cold War. And because of that, it's made a history book.
Yeah, they kept it very secret too, Bob. Yes, because they had the Vietnam War going on at the time. They didn't want they didn't want people back home. Nobody was involved in another conflict also. So it was it was a lot of things they kept secret, from the public.
Well, the Vietnam War scared the government because it got so out of control, and it was the first war living rooms almost instantaneously. And it terrified the government. And so from that point on, they just kept a lid on everything they were doing. It really sent them underground. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we would observe whether people knew about it or not. But history books were never going to know a lot of this stuff because they're just now starting to declassify certain things, and they're still being very secretive about a lot of things that they won't declassify. So even now, the secrecy continues.
Yep.
You know, how many of the reports are hidden or permanently, how do you want to say, disappeared? Let's say, for example, in Korea along the DMZ. You know, incidents are known by many of us to happen, but there's nothing, even when they have declassified so-called reports, you never hear about most of the incidents that happen. You never hear about being declassified. So, you know, but I know also a gentleman stated, and you know the gentleman, I don't want to outwardly mention his name, but he said that, you know, after the Vietnam, we pulled out the ground troops out of Vietnam in '73, that incidents weren't required to be reported anymore like they were beforehand during Vietnam and the past. So a lot of things that happened after '73, you know, were not required by the Army chain of command, or I should say military. A lot of it's Army, where, you know, whether it was Germany or whatever, or Korea. But, you know, they were not required to report incidents all the way up. And so, and I believe that because, you know, I've seen it, known stuff to happen you can't find online for a lot of it. Very few things you do. You know, you know, and that's, you know, that's...
I'm sure that's true, but I'm also sure that, well, for Korea, for example, I think it was in 2004 when they first started releasing the UNC notes from the Armistice Commission, and there are hundreds of pages of that stuff where we were complaining and meeting with the North Koreans to no avail about these incidents that were occurring. So if it took them that long to release just the minutes for those meetings, you know, and there was nothing serious in those things other than vague details. So I personally believe there's still a lot of stuff out there that they have no intention. It'll stay black-lined and buried forever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and, you know, granted, the East German Czech borders, you know, wasn't, we'll say, quite as active as the DMZ was. But the thing is, incidents did happen along the East German Czech borders, and, you know, still, you know, they did not always come to light either, I believe. Or if it did, it was very short-lived.
And that brings up a very good point, too, that I hope my books in this series will help crack, is that a lot of the guys that served in Korea feel like their service was a little bit more, I don't know how to properly say it without being offensive. Dangerous.
Proactive? Dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, I think
they look down upon the guys that served in Germany, just like the guys in Germany think the same thing, because we didn't know what was going on in Korea. And the guys in Berlin think theirs was even more important than the guys on the West Germany because they were surrounded by the communists. And none of this is true because we all, if you served overseas during the Cold War, you served in a very volatile, very high tense area of the world. And we may not have been patrolling in the DMZ and have to worry about North Koreans shooting at us, but if the guys in Germany had to worry about the Soviets an hour away from you dropping nuclear bombs on your head.
That's true.
So there was a different risk, a different stress level, but nobody, in my opinion, has had a more dangerous job than some
the DMZ was a little more active, at small combat situations in Germany. But, no doubt that, my friends who were 11th HR in the old Fulda Gap, as they tell you, they were the major speed bump for Germany. So, and
it's just a matter of perception. You guys, not everybody in South Korea was on patrols in the DMZ, and I don't want to get into tit for tat with that because I didn't serve in South Korea, and I don't want to come off that I'm degrading or lessening the service there. The point is, the books, I hope, are making people aware that their brothers and sisters in the military have just as bigger responsibilities than ever other duty assignments. Because Germany it was stressful. The alerts that we had over there every time you thought it was a nuclear attack, and every time you stepped foot in the DMZ, you thought somebody was going to be shooting at you, and the unknown creates more stress than knowing what you're walking into. So and the other side of that coin too is the books are also, as you see, there's a lot of non-combat or non-frontline elements that I discuss in there. We talk about cooks and finance people and everybody, because every job in the military is just as important. You couldn't control the DMZ if you didn't have an armor bringing in, making sure that your weapons were available, and supply that had the munitions and the food coming. And we certainly wouldn't have done our jobs if we weren't getting paychecks. So I'm trying to show that every job in the military is responsible because of it all. You just depended upon each other. So there's a lot I'm trying to express in these books. That's why there's going to be 12 to 15 of them.
Yes, and I totally agree with you too, Bob. And what would life like for a soldier, like everyday life in Germany?
In Germany, it was a cyclic life. We spent all of our time in the field training to be ready for the Soviet invasion. When we weren't training, we were either preparing to go training or cleaning up, recovering, and going through the inspection phase, just like you guys in Korea did before you went on patrols. You had your pre-patrol phase and your inspections, and you had your debriefing. So it was a very cyclic life like that, except our deployments were 30 to 40 days, a lot of 2-week ones. And when we weren't deployed, we'd get a couple 3-4 day passes, and everybody hit the bottle.
Okay.
That's how we dealt with it. We had stresses just like the guys now do. There was car bombs and pipe bombs was a huge issue in Germany in the 80s. There were a lot of different terrorist organizations over there that were bombing at the airport and kidnapping high-ranking dignitaries. And so there was a lot of that. I can still remember the briefings that we had telling us to be careful, was meeting new girls in the bars because they could very easily be Soviet spies. And so
we get that in Korea too.
You trained hard and then you drank hard.
Yeah, we get that too. We get the OPSEC briefings too. Watch what you say when you're downrange. You don't know who's listening to you in the clubs.
Yeah.
And I think that's everywhere because it's easy for.
The matter is, in Korea, there were more spies. The North Korean side, the Germans were spying on us. I mean, the Germans, the Soviets, but not to the scale of that up close and like they were in North Korea. Not until the 80s. Now, in the 80s, when the Ryan, codename Ryan, went into effect, and they were really sure that we were getting ready to attack them. That's the only time they actually got spies out there trying to talk to the soldiers everywhere. But you guys, from what the book 3 talks about, if you go out and have an incident of patrol and come back, and they broadcast over the speakers the name of the guys that were on the team that was in the gunfight. So, there was a tell me there were a lot of people working for the North Koreans in the South, so I'm sure you had to be a lot more careful than we did, although you didn't get to pass us. I don't think, what do you have, 5% of the unit could be out on pass at one time?
What it was up, and this was up till '88 when the Olympics came along. The pass policy changed, but that's because up in what we call the Old Western Corridor, up there near Panmunjom, there was a curfew in that area. Many parts of northern, the northern part of the Rock there were curfews set in place for years, and so you had to be off the streets by midnight. And so, but when the Rock government, when the South Korean government dropped a curfew south of Freedom Bridge, as we call it, on the south side of the Injun Gat, that's when the second ID at the time changed their pass policy. It used to be it was either 10 or 20%. I think it was only 10% could be out after midnight.
Yes.
Everybody else had to be back in.
I read somewhere that you had to make, I thought it was 95% straight, but maybe it was 90.
Yeah.
So only 10% of the forces could get overnight passes at one time. We were out for 30 days at Graf and Homersfeld. We'd come back filthy and spend a week with the inspections and cleanup. Then they give us a 4-day pass and the whole unit disappeared.
Yeah, we wouldn't do that.
We had the requirement that we had to be within 4 hours of base. I mean, that was a given. Unless you were on leave, pass or not, you had to be able to report in within 4 hours.
Yeah, Bob, in my time, going back in the late '60s, you was lucky in my unit. You was lucky to get for 30 days. You get 1 day pass for 30 days. Some of us took us 45 days before we could get a pass.
Yeah. That's,
well,
it wasn't like that when I was there. And to change the subject just a little bit, one of the cool things that I've enjoyed about the book, besides meeting all these wonderful veterans, I've made more friends since I started this series. And real quick, it's kind of cool when I talk to a veteran on the phone just like you today that I've never met.
Right.
There was a thing when Tom and I first talked. After you say hello and a couple sentences, it's like we've known each other our whole life. We just kind of slipped into that veteran Army mode. And there really is a bond there between people, whether you serve together or not. And that's kind of cool. But I've learned some really cool historical facts that I try to work into the books. Things like you were there in the 60s.
I was there 69 to 70 on the in the second division.
And you were in Korea?
I was on DMZ. I was 11D.
Were you in Germany anytime?
No, during no time. I did like a month in Nam and the rest of the time in Korea.
Yeah. I think that was in Korea that when somebody, I can't remember, but it happened in Germany too, but President Kennedy came to do an inspection, and they made him pull out every vehicle in the motor pool, whether it had engines in it or not, and they spit shined them on that parade field so that Nixon could drive by. Same thing might happen when Reagan came to Korea, and it just amazed me that we would pull the wool over our commanders-in-chief, and yet we taught integrity and all those principles, and we're expecting, we were held to a higher standard, and yet the hires up would do something like that when the commander-in-chief came through. And there's a lot of stories like that with visiting presidents in the books, and a lot of history. So I'm not just talking about what the guys did and the girls, but there's some really cool stories that come out of that.
Well, Levi, to bring out what's nice about Bob's books,
Okay.
is that Bob is telling the stories from the soldier's point of view.
Right.
The first book is his, but on books 2 and 3 and the others he's working on, he's taking the stories from the soldier and putting their story. I mean, each chapter is another soldier. That's what it comes to, their story, and that's what makes it so enlightening, as he's telling the various stories of various soldiers, that served, and so, and that's what really makes it nice, neat, is that you're reading on what each soldier went through, whether it was Germany or Korea.
And it was different jobs, different eras. So each book is in chronological order, so, it starts out with maybe a mechanic, and then the next chapter is a cook. But yeah, I like to tell it from their perspective what their service was like, so that people can learn what it was like to serve in its different capacities in that book, whether in Korea or in Germany. The first book, I go into I didn't bar anything. I told just like it was how hard it was to be in infantry. Very realistic about the hardships and the demands and why 40% of us are disabled or out of the service because of those demands. So I don't get into as much physicality of our service because book one really lays the groundwork for that. That allows me to tell more about each different soldier and what it was like doing their job and where they were at. And then I can weave in the history of the Cold War through their stories. So, when the President's Palace, when they tried to invade that and assassinate him, I got to do that during the chapter of I think it was Stan Works that was there during that one, as I recall. So I get to tell stories like, historical events while I'm telling it to different soldiers.
Right, and Bob, and Bob, that was great because when I first came in, I requested Germany. I really want to go to Germany back, but they sent me the other way. So that's why that's why I'm very interested, learning about Germany, how what our soldiers did in there.
It's just amazing to me because I, honest to God, did not know anything about Korea. And if you read book one, my best friend who talked me into joining the service went to Korea, and yet I had no idea of what you guys did over there. So just like you didn't know what it was like from my perspective in Germany, I didn't have a clue about Korea.
Okay.
So I knew the history and the DMZ, but I didn't know what you guys did. I sure didn't know it was that frightening, and I learned a lot studying and talking to guys for that book. Excuse me.
That's right. I've been hacking all the past week, Bob. I found until I went on my first tour to Korea, and we had this discussion when we had Mark Heath go on, as you know, Mark. And Korea, you hear guys talk about patrolling the DMZ and that, but you never heard the details, and you didn't hear much else. When you're stateside duty. A lot of it, of course, I hear, you have a lot more guys that serve in Germany and Korea, because when you're talking multiple units, especially Canadian CAV, you got 11th ACR, 2nd ACR, little own 8th ID, and so forth, 3rd ID, and, so you hear the stories of Germany, a lot more than you would Korea, too. Because Korea, when you're only talking 2nd ID, and that was it, you didn't hear the stories quite as much, on Korea as you would Germany. But even the guys that talk about it, you hear the mission's real, over in Korea, but, you take that in strides, like, okay, until you get there, and you actually see it.
You guys had secret clearances, and you weren't allowed to talk to it if you were on actual patrols in there. And so, my last duty station was Hawaii, and as awesome as that sounds to people, they're like, what kind of career could you have? You served in Hawaii. It was the most physically demanding leg of my career that we converted to light infantry during that phase, and we spent all our time humping, and it was tough, but they went to Team Spirit, the 25th Infantry Division. They rotated brigades every year, and I happened to be in Meenock when my my unit went to Team Spirit. But those guys came back, and they didn't. Nobody knew what you guys were doing in the DMZ. So there was a level of secrecy there, and I think for the most part, the soldiers down there didn't talk about it because Team Spirit folks were interacting with Korean soldiers all the time, the American soldiers, and they didn't come back telling stories about gunfights, and so we were all clueless. But you know that's why I'm so proud of these books, and that's why I think you and I have talked about this, Thomas. I don't have them priced high. I'm not making big bucks off of them. They're $2.99 on the ebooks.
Oh, you can't beat that.
Like $1.80 per book. Paperback, same thing. I think I make $1.60 off the paperbacks. They're priced at $10. But it's a project of passion. If I wanted to get rich off it, I'd be charging 4 or 5 times that. But then I wouldn't be selling as many copies. You know, it's. I want soldiers to be able to afford it, and $3 anybody can afford. And I want people that never served, but maybe know somebody that served in the Cold War to pick it up. It's worth a lot more than $1.80 to me every time somebody that never served read that book and tells me they learned so much they had no idea that that's what our soldiers were doing. It's worth a bunch more than that $1.80 or $1.70 to have somebody that served tell me, boy, you brought so many memories back to me. I'm so glad I read your book. So, you know, you can't put value on that, but I do have it priced very cheaply, not for profit, but to make it affordable to everybody. And every book in the series will be it that way.
Well, what makes the series so...
It's a project of passion. I'm going to write other books that hopefully will sell. I've got a couple out now, and a couple more in my head, but I'm not going to write them until I get the Cold War series, at least these next 4 books out. So
Yeah. Well, you know, overall, to put out to the listeners, what makes it so intriguing about Bob's series, We Were Soldiers Too, it's a soldier's perspective on the Cold War, not somebody writing a book on what the politicians thought or, you know, the brass hats thought. It's coming from the common soldiers, the common sailors, you know, the ones who would have to do the fighting, however you want to, you know, express it. But it's coming from their perspective, what we actually saw. You know, you could you could write on the book, okay, JFK's experience during the Cold War, you know, and yeah, you know, he had a lot weighing on his shoulders, but it wasn't his ass on the ground ready to get, you know, blown away like it was ours, you know, and so that's the whole big thing in the book series, the perspective of those who were on the front lines, you know, those of us.
You know, and I wish that I had more people who had served in the DMZ volunteered, because that's the thing with my books is I have to have, because I'm not making money off them, I need people to volunteer to share their stories. And a lot of people, I think, are a little cautious to do that because they don't want to be getting rich off their careers. And so it limits some people volunteering. And anyway, I'd like to have a lot more people that served in the actual DMZ, because there were so many declassified stories that I just couldn't really talk about because I didn't have anybody in there. But, you know, it is what it is, and I think I did a good job making do with what I had. I had 9 excellent, 7 with 9 tours that are excellent people, and, you know, the first 2 books book 2 won 8 awards.
Wow.
But it was always the bridesmaid, never the bride, what I'd like to say.
Okay.
Because it's always a finalist or a bronze medalist. I got honorable mention in one, which is like the next step up from a finalist. But I never got Book of the Year. And I only had one contest that was still open when I finished the Korean book, and I shot it off real quick. And it actually won Book of the Year for military history books.
to get their story to you. Hey, Bob, some people you asked to get their story to you lagged in doing that, didn't they? We won't mention my name. But,
yeah, I had some pretty good notes on your career that must have been that I'd have loved to have gotten in there, but that's all right.
I was more intrigued tracking down information for Bob than I was getting my story to him.
Uh-huh.
Actually, what he was saying, I finished the book, I was like, well, shit, I'm leaving, but hell, I didn't get my story to him. I was, oh, well, that's all right. I'm not a, so.
Well, you know what, there's going to be, trust me, this thing's getting legs of its own, and I'm coming up with different ideas. We'll get you worked in there, I promise, my friend.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You had some funny stories that they just got to be put in print. We can't lose them.
Yeah, we could do one, the contractor's view of Korea. No, but, see, I spent enough time over there.
There's some really cool personal stories too that I'll share with you, and I post some of them on my blog. But I do have one of the very first women to serve in a combat arms unit in Germany in World War II. Juanita Coover served on a Lance missile crew, and it was just a couple years after the LAC had been dissolved and they integrated the women into the Army, and they weren't supposed to put them in dangerous positions right away, and yet some of them slipped through the cracks that did make it to Germany. And on her base, I believe there were just two, her and another lady that ended up in a clerical position. But it's a good story to read what it was like being a woman in a man's world, especially in a Lance missile unit. And then Jerry Myers has got kind of a cool story that shows you how by accident you can actually find yourself in the center of a key part of history. And he was serving as a cook in Wiesbaden at the Air Force mess hall, and when President Reagan was taking his oath to be in office on January 20th, 1981, he got put on the order, and all the cooks and clerical people on his unit were put in full combat gear, issued live rounds and flak vests, and they were taken over to the Air Force hospital, and the parking lot was secured, and they were assigned positions around the perimeter to make sure nobody got in. And huge floodlights were brought into the parking lot, and next thing you know, these blue Air Force buses roll up, and it's got the 53 Iran hostages on it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Those of us of a certain age remember, or of course, the newer generations have probably seen the movie, but yeah, they spent 444 days in captivity, brutal captivity, and they released them the day before Reagan took office. My guess is they were probably just as scared of him as the Soviets were. They were quickly shuttled to the hospital in Germany. Well, the base military, the infantry and the combat armed guys were actually out on training maneuvers. Nobody knew this was going to happen, and so life was going on as normal in Germany, and so they had to get security quick. And you got a guy like Gary Myers, who's a cook, ended up guarding the parking lot where they unloaded the hostages from Iran. And, you can't make stuff like that out.
No, you can't.
And so, there's just a lot of cool stories like that.
Well, and,
stuff in Korea, there's some hilarious stuff about that. And the odor in the country. I mean, if you haven't been there, it's just almost hard to ride, although I've been told I described it pretty well. But there's just some cool stuff like that is smitten throughout the books to make it interesting, too.
Well, Bob,
one thing I think you find, too, Korea or Germany, I know both lived on the high of alerts. constant alerts, constantly being called, alerts constantly happen. I mean, I know in Korea it was, I've seen up to 3 alerts in one day, and it's the different levels of them, but, there was alerts constantly. I know in Germany you had to endure the same thing. And, sometimes it gets so involved, you didn't know what was going on. Did it hit the fan? Are we actually going to war? I mean, I know there are moments, and people don't realize that, they don't hear that. They hear they're back home watching NBC News, and we're out there, 2 in the morning loading up vehicles and getting ready to move out the gate. In our case, we didn't. No, you didn't know it was real or not. You just know you're called on alert, and it's like, is this another alert, or did it, does it hit the fan?
Right.
In Germany, they didn't issue, at least our unit didn't issue the ammo with the weapons. There was a Connex that was shipped out. So we would have never known anyway when we hit our assembly area out to that gate if it was real or not until they issued the ammo. So your heart is sinks every time that alert goes off.
Oh, yeah. Well, in Korea,
nuclear threat and the crazy communists an hour from us, and you guys had, a few miles from you, one of the most craziest dictators in the world. So.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think they breed them crazy over there because every year it's every one of them's been a lunatic, and you never know when they're going to do something stupid and end up causing a war.
Right. And Thomas, when we got the alert over in Korea on the DMZ, we always fully loaded so we never know it was false or what, but we was always fully loaded when we got an alert.
Well,
because the threat was so close. We had to convoy an hour to get to the border. So my unit, that's why we didn't get the ammunition issued right away. We're units actually on the border. They were locked and loaded for every alert they went on because, like you, they were just miles or feet from the enemy. So it's just 2 different worlds, and everybody who's served or worked in one of those worlds thinks that theirs was the most dangerous and most important. And like I said, back to the books, they were all important. Every job every soldier did during the Cold War was important.
That's true.
And I honestly believe that the wall would have never come down had we not held strong and put the fear in the Soviets anyway that they didn't stand a chance against us. Especially after Reagan got in office. You were there in 1960. It had to have been terrifying because 1955 is when the armistice was signed, wasn't it? 53?
Or 53, yeah.
53,
July 25th, 53 is when the armistice was signed.
And I got there in 69.
It was still pretty confusing in the 60s in Korea, and I'll bet it was scary every day there, so my hat's off to you. That had to have been a frightening tour.
Well, it's like on both sides of the line. You didn't know what to expect. Back to what you're talking alerts. What we had to do, one was the air cab in the 80s in Korea. We had what we call Quicksaber, the 47 cab. And what Quicksaber was QRF, Quick Reactionary Force, actually. And what had happened, we had 3 air troops in the divisional cab there, 47 cab. And once every 3 weeks, your troop had Quicksaber. Well, every day you had to have, one squad or section of scouts, Blues platoon, cab scouts, 12 scouts were on call for Quicksaber. And you had 12 scouts, 2 slicks, the Hueys, and eventually the UH-60s, 2 Cobras and 2 58s. And you're on call 24/7. And it's like I've told people before, there's nothing more scary, what scared me, not so much being in the DMZ. You kind of knew what to expect up there. But when you're loaded up in a chopper at 2 in the morning with the rotors turning, you have your weapon and ammo, and you're thinking you're sitting in that seat looking at each other like, what the heck's going on? And it's like, what is 12 of us going to do?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, that's just, when you get that, I've had to have them 2 times where we were loaded up the chopper with rotors turning. And when the rotors are turning, that means we're taking off.
And that was what made the alerts so scary, is commanders liked to hit the button anytime there was something significant happening in the world. And so, it only added to the stress level when something like that, on one, just any historical event happens that's bad, and then we're about on alert. And they just love to do that.
Right. Well, Bob,
it's terrifying. But no matter what, if you served in an overseas unit during the Cold War, the other thing we had in common was that we were going to die.
Oh yeah.
All of our missions in Germany we had a 48-hour life expectancy. Our job was to hold the line until reinforcements from Europe and stateside could get here. Your job in the DMZ was the same thing: hold steady, so second ID and all the people that were behind you that weren't in the DMZ at that time could get down there and hold them. The Hawaii and the other units that were in reserve could get on site.
Well, Bob, we call them the speed bump.
I mean, it's suicide. If you serve in them positions, you didn't expect to live if the bubble burst.
Oh yeah. Well, I think what Levi's trying to say is, especially in Korea, when they always said we were the speed bump.
We just
and see in the sector, our sector in the area, you had the Imjin Gat on the south side of the DMZ. Well, there was really, for a good many miles, Freedom Bridge was the only bridge through the DMZ, and that thing was, wired with explosives to blow, one-leg wooden bridge. And, or I should say wooden plank, it was a metal bridge. And the guys are up north at the 1st and the 9th in the 80s, they redesignated 506. But those guys, they were kind of really the sacrificial ones, because the odds are the bridge was going to be blown before they even get across.
Yeah, we wasn't going to get to the bridge. And, on DMZ, we know that, too, that was... that was it. We wasn't going to make it back to the bridge.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of stress for a kid to serve under. I don't care who you are. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to be put on a kid.
Oh, it is. It is. Seeing like in, it just, I don't think people understood the dangers on both borders. And I mean, Korea is still there naturally today, but we haven't had to endure it since 91, since we haven't held a sector up in the DMZ since we turned our last sector over in October 91. And so what few Americans you gather up there on JSA, which is, I hate to sound mean, but they're pretty much a dog and pony show up there. And,
it's crazy, though, because the Soviets dissolved, and so the Koreans lost their main backing, and so now they didn't not only have that backing that the Soviets provided them, they didn't have anyone to keep them in check. And as much as we hated the Soviets, they kept those lunatic presidents in check somewhat by not allowing them to do certain things. And China the same way. Now that they're more of a democracy than they were, not 100% communist, they have less of an eye on North Korea than they did in the past, making North Korea more dangerous now than they've ever been, and yet we don't have any U.S. troops there. Significant amount anyway, to be able to, it's crazy. Just like Germany, we pulled them all out of there when the wall come
and
still the same. We never needed more American troops than now, and yet we're not in either place, and it's kind of frightening.
It is. Well, I've said it. In the last few years, I've said it. I think you find the world's a more violent, I don't know if dangerous, but a more violent place now after the Cold War than during the Cold War. Surely, if you think about it.
Because, the terrorist is, that's frightening. And, because if you're talking one person doing the damage instead of a whole country, attacking a whole regime, now one person can be a destructive force. It is frightening.
It is. It is, and
but there's still hot spots in the world. But anyway,
well,
one of the books I hope to write is to compare the Cold War versus the current war on terror.
And you'll find that some will say the Cold War has never been fully over, which I think, I think we could all incline to agree. You still got aspects of the Cold War. Like I've heard some people say, well, the Cold War is totally over. I said, yeah, really? I said, are you familiar with Korea? I said, Korea's always been part of the Cold War. Hello, it's still there. Now, the major enemy during the Cold War, I guess you could say major enemies, was the Soviet-bloc countries. But it's the communists, what's Vietnam? Vietnam was a product of the Cold War. The Korean War was a product of the Cold War. They're all products of the Cold War. If you really take it in, Grenada. What was Grenada? A product of the Cold War.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, all those combat, and there's other small ones, we could get into, but a lot of that was product of the Cold War. Products being they were part of the Cold War, I should say. And, you had Vietnam, but Vietnam was part of the Cold War. What was the whole concept of Vietnam? As to stop the communist aggressors. Why did we go in Korea? To stop the communist aggressors.
That's right.
What was the Cold War? Stop the communist aggressors. So, Grenada.
Now we don't have
we're really the rescue us too. Huh?
Now we have Russia that's invading Croatia. We have, they're doing more flyovers into international space and other sovereign countries than they ever did during the Cold War. They're getting braver and braver, and I don't think they're the communists, but they're starting to have their influence around the world, just like when they were the Soviet Union. So, look, they're hand in Korea and Syria, and all the hot spots around the world. The Soviets are involved on their own side somehow. Or the Russians.
Oh yeah, well, and we have weakened our military so much that we are becoming a laughing stock of the world.
Yeah.
We don't have the might, and I don't think, and many others agree. I mean, sadly, it's really weakened down in the last several years, and it's need to come to a stop. And people don't understand. You don't need, having a mighty military is not to go to war, but it's to prevent war.
Right. Well, my brothers, it's about time to end this program, but I want Bob to let everybody know how to purchase the We Are Soldiers, all the books and everything.
Bob does also have a website, by the way.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows. And the website is weweresoldiers2.com, by the way. Go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I do have a website. The books can be click on a link and it'll take you to where you can buy them. They're available on Nook. They're available on Amazon. They're available on Kobo. They're available on Apple Store. Just anywhere you want to get them, they are available. You can click a link on my website, weweresoldiers2.com.
Okay.
And actually, it'll take you straight to the Nook and the Apple of your choice. It's also got a nice blog on there called Papal Duke $2.99. It's $2.99 on every other outlet. And then, like I said, paper books are available through Amazon right now, and they're $9.99.
Well, Bob, you know we're gonna be pushing your book too on our Thomas and our website on WLMRradio.com. We will also be pushing your book also too.
Well, I appreciate that. And if you don't mind, to send me a MP3 of this interview or something that I can put up on my website.
Okay, you know we will.
I'll link right back to you guys.
You know we will, right, Thomas?
What's that?
I said you know we will. We'll send that to Bob.
Yeah, Bob knows these. Bob's going to expect that out of me, and he knows I'll help him do that. So I've had the honor to help Bob out quite a bit. Just so everybody knows, too, Bob is, We Were Soldiers, too, is on very multifacets of the social media. You know, we do have a Facebook page. Bob has a Facebook page where We Were Soldiers, too, you know, Instagram and so forth. So, you know, there are a lot of variation of pictures out there, Google to and videos. So there's a lot of different facets out there you can find We Were Soldiers too, and there's a lot of pictures, a lot of pictures from the Cold War floating around. Might not be exactly in the books, but they're there about the Cold War, and that's the whole idea. Is they're talking about the Cold War.
Well, I'm gonna make sure I buy all the books, Bob. Every book that you publish, I will buy them. And
I appreciate that. I hope others do.
Yeah, Bob. Cause when my wife goes to sleep, I have a good time to read. You know, I sit in my chair about 2 in the morning, and that's what I do.
That's when you come out with book 6 about the armored calf, so you can see how a real soldier lives.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I want to give credit to Tom, because he manages the social media stuff for me pretty much.
Yeah, Tom is very good.
I have a group called We Were Soldiers too, for people particularly interested in the book series. That we try to focus just on the book and getting information and sharing Cold War facts for the book series. The actual page and the social media stuff that Tom runs for me is more to help get the word out and to put pictures and kind of keep the name out there. And he does a great job of that.
Yes, Thomas do a very good job. Since me and Thomas have met, our station really picked up on the veteran program. We getting to listen from all over the place, from other countries too.
I just hopefully get a little more motivated again. I've been so sick this past week. Between work and sick, I my days are usually you get up, go to work, come home, and spend half the time and most of the time in bed. No, I enjoy doing it. The Cold War is important, and many of us, all of us grew up during the Cold War. All of us served during the Cold War, so whether you served in Korea, Germany, or even the States, at that matter.
Okay.
But we all know what it's. It's a story. The Cold War is getting further and further away. Okay. The wall came down in '89. Again, that was 28 years ago.
Right, and
28 years ago.
And
the last guy, the last individuals to serve there when the wall came down, would be 46 now.
Okay. And once again, Bob, I would like to thank you for coming on the show, because I really can go on about 2 or 3 more hours if I could, because it's very interesting. But
I can talk for 2 or 3 more hours.
Yeah, we go. Well, Thomas, I wonder can we get Bob on for next week also too? Because it's a lot more questions I want to ask Bob.
Hold on, let me check my cheat sheet. I've been working some other sheets. No, we got actually, and what I like to do, and this coincides. Yeah, a lot of the people I'm looking to work in are actually Cold War vets.
Okay.
Believe it or not. I tell you what, Bob, would you mind doing it on the 12th?
I'm available anytime. Just want to give me. We'll chat on Facebook or somewhere, and we'll set something up.
Let me go to the 12th, because speaking of Cav, I got a Cav guy who's who serves solely in Germany. He's going to come on next week, the 5th.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I got Doug Voss is going to be on the 29th. And Doug, and Bob, you know Doug. And I got Harold Mason will be on the 5th. And so, Doug, for the listeners know, we got Doug Voss next week. We get a break next week. So, the 5th we'll probably record early, Levi.
Okay.
That's Super Bowl Sunday.
Okay.
But we got Doug Voss will be on, just so everybody knows, January 29th. Doug is a Cold War vet. Doug served on the DMZ and in Germany. So, Doug, he will give us his experiences on both, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the videos that Doug and I put together.
Okay.
The following week, February 5th, which is Super Bowl Sunday, the week of Super Bowl, we will have Harold Mason on. Harold is a veteran of the Cold War, but with the Armored Cav, with the lead up to Bush 6. I'll be part of it. But Harold served with the old 11th ACR up in the Fulda Gap.
Okay, with
we'll
Thomas.
Talk more about Germany then, too.
Okay, with Thomas, we at that time, I want to thank all our listeners, for tuning in to the Veteran Hour show. And we'll be back on next week at the same time. All right, and once again, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.